one to do right now. Bezrat Hashem. Okay, so we're very, very excited. This is the beginning of Project Bereshis. This is the beginning of going through the book of Genesis with the help of God. The siyata d'shmaya that we should know. We should know Bereshis. And everyone can open their chumishes, because so many questions come up in Chumash, and especially from the creation of the universe, to be able to have an understanding of how God set up the Torah from the beginning, and also to understand. Okay, so we'll have to speak on that. That Bereshis is so deep and is so fundamental, and also to appreciate that when it comes to Bereshis, we want to hold on to Rashi. That Rashi is everything that's going to guide us through the journey of Bereshis. And the tzaddikim say that there's a heichal of Rashi, that Rashi has a yeshiva up in Shemayim, and that if you really learn Rashi properly, you get to go up to that yeshiva. Also, as we learn the Gemara, so who are Tosfos, my friends? Tosfos are the grandchildren of Rashi. Now, do the Balei Tosfos seem to take what Rashi says and just accept it? They rip it apart. They take whatever Rashi says and they rip their grandfather's words apart. But when it comes to Rashi on the Chumash, they don't say a word. Because everybody knows, you could argue with Rashi on the Shas, but Rashi on Chumash is Kodesh Kodashim Mamish. So we're going to see that this is the Heichal of Rashi. Rashi is going to take us to a great place. Something came into the world with Chumash Rashi, that the tzaddikim say is a different category of Ruach HaKodesh.
Isn't there a lot of different opinions of Chumash, like
Yeah, there's a lot of opinions, but we'll see when it comes to Rashi on Chumash, this is as fundamental as it gets. This is as basic as it gets. There's a famous story that I heard from the tzaddik, that somebody was writing a book on Kabbalah, a big, like one of these magnum opuses on Kabbalah. And he came to the tzaddik and it was like a 50-page, magnum opus. And the tzaddik said, "This is great, but it's just way too long." So he said, he's like, "You got to make this much shorter." So he cut it down and this and 20 pages, and way too long. Too long? It's 20. I'm putting all of Kabbalah. I'm already making a summarized version. He said, way too long. He comes back, 4 pages. All of Kabbalah, 4 pages. Way too long. Way too, fine. 1 pager. He comes back. 1 page. Way too long. Way too long. He summarized the whole of Kabbalah. He puts it into 1 line, a 1 sentence, all of Kabbalah. And the Rebbe's like, way too long. You got to shorten this thing. So the guy mamish goes back. He's thinking and he's going. How am I going to make this? He comes back to the tzaddik with 2 words. And the tzaddik is like, perfect. And he says, Ayin Rashi. See Rashi. Rashi Chumash. That all of Kabbalah, everything is being alluded to in Rashi's and Chumash, and especially in Bereshis. And therefore, to really take learning Chumash, Rashi very seriously, especially Bereshis, especially Genesis, in the beginning, as we're going to see that even the words "in the beginning" are not so pashut. In the beginning, what does Bereshis mean? No, you open your art scroll, in the beginning. Maybe it means in the beginning of, which is very different than in the beginning. As opposed to in the beginning of God's creating the heaven and earth. But not in the beginning God created. You have to see. This is all in Rashi. And we take certain words at very much face value, like, Bereshis. Rashi is going to really make very clear that certain things are much deeper than we ever thought. So the first line begins, and there's so much to say. We get on the first letter of Bereshis. But for the sake of moving through the psukim and learning how to move through the psukim and learning how to read Rashi, we're going to move a little bit. So Bereshis bara Elokim Eisa Shamayim ve'Eisa Aretz. Bereshis, bara, we'll call it in the beginning of God's creating the heaven and the earth. And we're going to get to what the word Bereshis means in the second Rashi. But Rashi begins the entire of Chumash with a very interesting Rashi. And this Rashi has to really be thought about and meditated on. So says Rashi, Bereshis. This is a Rashi that when people like to say all over the world, you know, this bottle of water was promised to you 4,000 years ago, and this shear, sometimes people will even use like Hebrew words, this shear was promised to you 5,000 years ago. So this Rashi is the ultimate in really addressing this. And it's interesting that Rashi begins the entire Chumash with this Rashi. Bereshis, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. There's an opinion that this Rabbi Yitzchak was Rashi's father. Shlomo ben Yitzchaki. The Rashi, Shlomo ben Yitzchak. That Rashi is beginning his entire parish on Chumash with Kibud Avein, with honoring his father and giving a vort that he heard from his father. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. What really we're asking here is, why does the Torah begin? The Torah could have begun with anything. Why did God decide to begin the Torah with the entire narrative of the creation of heaven and earth? The Torah could have started with anything. And specifically, what the basis of the question is that the Torah, which means Horah, which means guidance for life, is a book on mitzvahs. It's a book on how to live the 613 mitzvahs. If the whole Torah was about teaching me the 613 mitzvahs, then why are you beginning with the story of creation? Just get right to the meat and potatoes, like we say, and start with the first mitzvah that was given to the nation of Israel, which was HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, that you have the ability and you have the power and the responsibility to decide the new months. So why are you beginning the entire Torah with the narrative of Bereshis, Bar Lakim Eisa Shamayim Ve'Eretz? So let's see that inside. So says the Torah, Loi hayetzarach lahatchil as Torah ela me'achodesh hazeh lachem, which, by the way, is already all the way in the second book of Shmos. Based on the question, the entire Torah should have began, clipped all of Genesis, clipped the entire beginning of Shmos, and the Torah should have began its first words, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. So why did it begin with the entire narrative? Okay, Rabbi say, hold on to your tzitzis, because the answer is very strong. You ready for the answer? This answer was promised to you 4,000 years ago. That this was the first mitzvah that was given to the Jewish nation. Why do we begin with the entire narrative of Bereshis?
So like how the rest of the world can know that it's a Shem, not just for us, but for everyone.
Okay, very good. We're going to see that, yes, that Hashem is for humanity. Yossel?
Before we get to the commands, we can see there's a commander in our relationship with him, as far as we're not just doing this because someone told us to, it's because the creator of heaven and earth told us to.
Okay, very good. That's exactly it. And based on that, once I know that there's a creator of heaven and earth, so then there's authority to the creator of heaven and earth. Once there's a creator of heaven and earth, so now that creator has authority and can make decisions, obviously, as opposed to you, the subject of creation. You're going to tell the creator, the infinite creator of heaven and earth, that you could do things better than he can, which seems to be a very common thing, that people seem to think they could run the world better than God. But we're going to see in a moment that one of the specifics of this, one of the practical nafkaminas of this, is that once there's a creator of heaven and earth, that means that there's an authority to the creator of heaven and earth. Let's see it inside the words in Rashi. And Rashi is now going to quote from David HaMelech. And it's amazing that so much of humanity who loves David HaMelech, but they seem to pick and choose which pieces they want to learn from the Psalms. This part of the Psalms is a very important piece of the story. So says David HaMelech. This is in Psalms 111, verse 6. Koyach masiv higed le'amoy. The power, koach, of ma'asav, of his creation. Higid, God said over to his people. Why? Why did God want to say over the power of his creation? Meaning that God is the creator and wants to tell us that he's the creator. Which means the whole beginning of Bereshis, of knowing that there's a creator, that the world did not just come out of a bunch of soup up in the sky, that there's an active, deliberate, conscious, loving creator of heaven and earth. Why does God want us to know that? Says King David, Lo seis lahem nachlas goyim. In order to know that there is a storyline, there is a deliberate sequence of events specifically related around the land of Eretz Yisrael. Says the Torah, She'im yoimru umas ha'olam liYisrael, that let's say that the nations of the world will come to Klal Yisrael and they will say, Listim atem, you guys took the land. You took the land. Listim atem. I'm sure nobody's ever accused us of doing that. Listim atem. Remember, this is from 1,000 years ago, quoting from King David from thousands of years ago, quoting from God from all the way back. Which means we're reading prophetic words. That they will say, Listim atem. That you guys, you took the land. Shekavashtem artzai shiva goyim. That you took the land. There were 7 nations here. Those peoples do not exist anymore. But the Torah does give an accounting that when we came into the land, there were people here. So who was really native here? So says Rashi, my friends, and really hear this. Let this set and settle into your heart very deeply. To that end, Haim Oimrim Lahem, that Klal Yisrael, the Jewish nation, will respond to the accusations, which I'm sure nobody's ever heard before. Any, not nice words ever being, slingshotted at you. But if they would ever happen, then the response to that is, and soon someone's going to say this in the UN, and someone's going to say this, and people are joking about this. 3,000 years, 8,000 years, this is promised 250 trillion years ago, like your green, smoothie. But the response is, Kol ha'aretz shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The entire land belongs to God. How do I know that? Bereshis bara Elokim eisa shamayim ve'eisa aretz. That's why the entire Torah begins with, let's set the set and setting of who is the creator of heaven and earth, that nothing existed before God made. Once I know that, then the one who's the creator of heaven and earth means he's the one who decides and is responsible to make the decisions of who gets and what belongs to who. And therefore, once we set up that there's an infinite creator of heaven and earth, and we've set that clear from the beginning of the Torah, and that's why we're so in favor of our friends around the world. Learn Torah. Open up a Bible. Open up Genesis. What's one of the English ones? Just get yourself one of these and read the first line of the Torah, which says God made heaven and earth. And once we set that storyline clear, so then I could hear, as Rashi concludes, Hu bara, Hashem made the entire world. Unasana lasher yasher be'enav. And Hashem can give the entire world, or any section of the world, to whom that God feels is going in a straight path. Unasana lasher yasher be'enav. Biritzayin nasna lahem. In the beginning, God, yes, gave the land to those peoples that were here. We're talking about pre-Yoshua. We're talking about the book of Joshua here. That God gave it to those that were inhabiting the land then. But the Torah points out in many, many places, and we'll speak about this, that the covenant was made with Avram Avinu, that this will be your land. You're going to return to this land, and your ancestors will come to this land. So was this promised 3,500 years ago? Yes, just open up the Torah. Just open up the Torah. And therefore, nasna lahem ubiritzaynai, natna lahem v'nasna lanu. That in God's will, the God who creates heaven and earth, decided to take it and now bestow it to the children of Avram, of Yitzchak, and of Yaakov. That is the first Rashi of the entire Chumash, which means that is exceptionally important because he's framing the entire Bereshis Genesis story. That why are we speaking about the creator of heaven and earth is because God creates and is now able to decide. And therefore, if a person would but just learn Chumash and spend time with the Torah, he will start to allow these ideas to sink in by the dip, like my dear friend Yossel says. And even though it's not so popular to align with Klal Yisrael, you're aligning with the nation, especially those that are holding the torch of Torah, that are living with Torah values. By doing so, you're aligning with the bris, you're aligning with the covenant that Hashem said, I'm giving Eretz Yisrael to Klal Yisrael. This is how the entire of Genesis begins. Okay, Rabbi Isai, we should be Zoicha Mamish to know Bereshis. Like we said, we're going to go right into our Tehillim. So let's get the Tehillim poised and ready. In the Art Scroll edition here, it's page 975, Kuf Chaf Aleph, and this will be the way that we'll transition into our Gemara learning. Yes, and Gemara, for those who don't know, means the Talmud, and we love the Talmud. And therefore, everybody have the spot? Shir Lamalois. Because my wife said it cannot be that the Chaver don't know Tehillim Baal Peh. So we were learning King David's words, and we're going to continue to learn King David. The same King David who said, Koach Masav Higad Li'amoy, that God wanted to recount the power of Him being the Creator. Laseis Lehem Nachlas Goyim, in order to know that yes, God is the decider of whom He wants to give the world that He created to. And it doesn't just mean this world, it means the world to come. The Siyata Deshmaya. Kuf Chaf 121. 975, Kuf Chaf Aleph 121. It's the one that we've been saying non-stop. And it's wonderful to have our friends with us around the world and maybe to share where you're writing from. And to anybody who's interested, I would suggest really read the Torah. Open up the Chumash and read it. Open up the Chumash and open up King David, and then you're aligning yourself with the biblical truth that God set forth in the Torah. Okay? The Stone edition, it's English translated. The Chabad is a very nice edition, very good. It's a little bit more Hasidic. It reads very smoothly in the English.
With the Stone edition, I'm just thinking about how Stone, like Evan, in the name Evan, you have Av and Ben. Bereshis is where Hashem officially became a father, and he became his children. Rashi starts off
beautiful.
Bereshis honoring his fathers.
Very nice.
Stone edition, as far as getting with Bereshis.
No, that's the. It's I'm forgetting the name right now. The Gutnik, I think. Gutnik. It's very good. Yeah, it's very good.
got loads of lights, got loads of
like sparks of Chassidut. It's juicy. It's very good. You should make one. We should make one. But you need to be a big person. To mamish write a translation on Chumash, you need to know everything. You need to know everything. Okay, so Rabbi, so we're going to read it together. Shir Lamalois. We invite our friends around the world also to say this kapitel of Tehillim with us. And why we're doing this every day is that it's going to get inside of us to know this Tehillim. So we're going to say it all slowly all together. Shir Lamalois esai nai le'arim me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai yiseh shamayim va'oretz. Al yiten lamot raglecha al yanum shoimrecha. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomerecha, Adonai tzilecha al yad yeminecha. Yoimam hashemesh lo yakeka ve'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmor tzeischa vayecha me'ata v'yad olam. Okay,